All right. So, hello and welcome everyone to the second session of SAC Planning and Reporting live batch. So, I'm very excited again to welcome you all on this second session. Yesterday we had the first session, and today we are going to continue with that on the second session. Quick check on the logistics. I know you can hear my voice, so it's all good there. How about screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is it
Yes.
legible and big enough?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, I would request you to be on mute when I'm covering the content. And I will open the forum for questions for sure. Don't worry about it. And at the end, as customary, we will have Q&A as well. Starting next week, we are also going to have pre-session Q&A, which is 30 minutes before. Whoever is interested, they can log in at 8:30 a.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time, which will be your 6 o'clock in the evening for people in India, Indian Standard Time. So whoever is interested, they can join 30 minutes earlier, starting next week, not this week, starting next week, and then they can have pre-session Q&A as well. And one more thing I would like to reiterate, I have been receiving a lot of emails regarding video not being accessible, private, it's showing as private and it's not accessible on the YouTube playlist. So I have already informed this in the beginning of the session that the recordings will be available 48 hours after the class. So yesterday's recording will be available on Monday and today's recording will be available on Tuesday. So I would request you to please be patient and wait till 48 hours. I will try my best to do before that, but don't expect that, you will get recordings immediately after the class or even 4 or 5 hours after the class. Please allow me at least 24 to 48 hours because it takes time for the processing and also uploading on YouTube. And another very important point is that please log in to YouTube using the same email ID which you have shared with me. Now, many people have this complaint that they are not able to log into YouTube using their email address. In that case, please change your email address. I would prefer a Gmail address. And I would also recommend you to have one if you don't have one, because that easily allows to log into YouTube and the access will be given to that email. This is the time when you should let me know and change your email. Once we go to 3 or 4 or 5, 6 sessions, I will not be able to change the email address. Once you have set that email IDs, I will not be able to change and give access to another email address. So this is the time. If you want to make that change, I would implore you to please go ahead and do that now and then let me know. And then I'll allow the access or I'll provide the access on that particular email address. Okay. Like for example, Harish said that he has an iCloud email ID, but he is not able to access YouTube using iCloud email address. So in that case, he has created a Gmail ID or he already had Gmail ID. He had shared that with me. So similarly, please share the Gmail ID if you're not able to access through your another email provider ID. And also send me an email. Don't rely on the chat of this particular message or this meeting rather. Please send me an email so that we will have a proper track and I can make the necessary changes. Okay. All right. So yesterday, I'm just going to quickly do a refresher of what we did yesterday, and then I will go through the content. I'm sorry, I'll not be able to take questions right now because if I open forum for question, then the class session will get delayed and I have a lot to cover today. So I'm going to do a refresher of what we did yesterday. Then I'm going to cover what we are going to cover in today's session, the content, and then I will open the session for any questions. So people who have questions, again, I really apologize. I cannot take it right now. I would request you to just, hold that thought, keep your questions with you. and then we will discuss at the end. Okay. So yesterday, what did we discuss? Yesterday, we discussed the basic architecture of SAC and what is SAC, why do we use SAC, and how SAC fares compared to other reporting tools. So what is the main purpose of SAC? We discussed that, and we also discussed that how SAC is architected, like what is the basic architecture. I am going to go into a diagram which I created. Yesterday, we didn't have a proper diagram to show the architecture. Today, I have that. We will start with that. But just as a refresher, SAC is a reporting and planning tool. SAC is completely cloud-based tool, and SAC is a quarterly updated tool. So that means SAP will update the new features every quarter, once in 3 months. SAC is available on multiple devices. It can be accessed on mobile. We have an app as well for SAC for on iOS and Android. And we also have the URL website where you on your laptop, on your computer, you can go on that particular URL and access your reports. It's primarily a reporting and planning tool, very strong on planning and also very strong on reporting side. Plus, to add cherry on top, we also have some advanced features like machine learning and AI-based features. They are called augmented analytics. Okay, but the primary two basic core features of SAC are your reporting and your planning. So that is what we saw yesterday. Plus, we saw some frequently asked questions about SAC. And we also discussed that the basic objects you create in SAC are your connections, because you want to load the data. So you will have to have connections. Then you will create a model. And then on top of the model, you create a story. That is the basic architecture and basic objects you will need to create in SAC. Today, we are going to expand on that, zoom in on that, and we will also see the architecture. So today's agenda is SAC architecture. We will go into that. Connections overview. Yesterday, someone asked in the post-session Q&A that it's good if it will be good if you can have a connections diagram, and you can explain that what type of connections are available in SAC. So we will discuss that as well. Another question yesterday was the difference between standard and professional planning licenses. We also discussed yesterday that there are 3 types of licenses. We have the business intelligence license, we have the planning standard license, and planning professional. And there was a very good question from Shakti that what is the difference? Can you please tell us? Yesterday, we could not go into too much detail of that. Today, I have that with me, so we will go through that. Then for absolute beginners who are starting their journey in cloud, we will discuss some basic cloud terminologies, concepts. This is important because I also got emails saying that, there are, I'm a complete fresher in SAC. I have no background whatsoever. So can you please teach from scratch? I know that we have seasoned professionals mostly here who have already some experience or great experience in SAC. But we also have to keep in mind that there are absolute beginners and freshers who have never logged into SAC also. So keeping those people in mind, we all have to, work together on this journey. So that's why it's very important that I give you some basic terminologies and concepts about cloud. Then we will also introduce BTP. This is a buzzword. Lot of people are talking about it. And now you will see job descriptions. They are asking for BTP experience. What do you know about BTP? What experience do you have? What have you done in BTP? So we will introduce BTP, and we will see as analytics developers or consultants, what do we need to know in BTP? And do we really need to, get certified in BTP or get real experience or hands-on? Is it really mandatory for an analytics consultant or not? We will discuss that as well. Then there was a question yesterday saying that coding, what kind of coding is there in SAC? Is it really required? SAC, since it's a cloud tool, it's a graphical tool, everything we will do with drag and drop and clicks and with our mouse. But is coding really required in SAC? And if coding is required, what are the different coding paradigms or objects in SAC where you will do coding and why will you do coding? So we will discuss that. We'll touch upon that as well. Of course, going forward in this training, we will go in detail of data actions advanced formula, which is nothing but your coding in SAC. But today I'm just going to tell you that what functionalities or what requirements will force you to go for coding, and your regular drag and drop based development will not work. And then today we are going to create a simple model and a simple story based on a CSV file. Today I'm just touching upon this, and I am not going to create a planning model, and I'm not going to start on planning. That we will start from next week. Today, I'm just going to show you in the system how to create a simple model and how to create a simple story. This will give a starter for those who are absolute beginners. It might not be really interesting for people who have experience in SAC. But again, I would request you to please bear with me. Starting next week, it will get more complex and complicated, and you will start, getting the feel of it, the planning side of it. But before I go into planning side, I also have to cover the basics of SAC, like what is a model, how a model looks like, how to create a model, what is a story, how to create a story, how does it look like. So those basics will be covered first, and then we will go into the more depth. And then finally, we will open the forum for Q&A. All right, so today's session, let's go into it. First topic is SAC architecture. What SAC architecture looks like. So first, I'm going to give you an overall architecture, but then I'm going to go into the architecture for reporting and architecture for planning. And that will be a very interesting architecture for you, especially for freshers, for absolute beginners to understand. That will also give you the basic knowledge and the basic architecture you have to keep in mind. So this diagram I took, of course, from the blogs or the SAP sites or help documents. This tells you the overall architecture of SAC. They have mentioned 3 core functionalities: business intelligence, augmented analytics, and enterprise planning. We have already discussed that. We know what it is. Business intelligence is your reporting and dashboarding. Augmented analytics is your advanced features, and enterprise planning is your planning capabilities. So these are the core functionalities of SAC. And then you create reports in SAC, which are called stories. So the word you will use in SAC is story. And then you can, if you want to go for coding, that is your scripting, highly customized requirement, then those are also, previously they were called analytic applications. Now it is integrated in the story itself, but these are basically your scripting, advanced scripting, the coding. Then you have MS Office integration as well. That means SAC is now integrated in MS Excel and MS PowerPoint. So these two Microsoft tools are integrated now with SAC. So you can view your SAC stories in an Excel format in Microsoft Excel. There is an add-in for SAC. Similarly, you can embed your charts and graphs, etc. in your PowerPoint. That is your Microsoft PowerPoint integration with SAC. So that is what is MS Office integration. And then first one is digital boardroom. What is digital boardroom? Digital boardroom is basically your CIOs, your CFOs, your CEOs. When they have large meetings, conference meetings where, we have something called all hands meeting, right? So if you have those kind of meetings, then there is a big screen, okay? It's not anymore a monitor, small monitor, or it's not anymore a laptop. It is a huge, big screen for a conference meeting. And that big screen, which might be, 85 inches or 100 inches screen, which is a very, very big screen. It takes the entire wall. The entire wall is basically your screen. So some meetings are those CXOs will have that kind of meeting where they will have an overall enterprise or company level discussions. On those meetings, on that much big screen, your SAC story, when it is displayed, that is called digital boardroom. So digital boardroom is basically a type of story which is geared towards those huge, large conference meeting type screens, which are normally not used in your day-to-day operations. In day-to-day activities or operations, you will either use your laptop or your cell phone or your desktop. Okay. But these meetings will have a huge big screen. And that's why what we have is digital boardroom, where your story will fit that screen. And in fact, it can have a split screen also on digital boardroom. You can have two separate screens and your story will span across two separate screens seamlessly, and they will have that touch functionality where they will just touch and scroll through pages, different pages, etc. So all that huge big screen related technology and the compatibility of our stories into those screens is called digital boardroom. Boardroom means the meeting of the CXOs. CXO means those CEOs, CIOs. That CXO term means all those executives, the top level executives, they are called CXOs. So when they have those meetings, then they have those big screens. Okay, so that's what it means. And then, of course, technically, if you go into the tool, you can connect different sources. So there is data connectivity. You can transform data. Like, for example, there is two columns, first name, last name. You want to combine into one column, full name. That is called transformation. So you can do all that in data preparation. Then there are models. As I told you, model is the basic entity which you have to create. It can be a live model or it can be a import data model. Then there is administration, there is auditing, there is transport, which is called lifecycle management. Transport means move your changes from development to quality system and then to production system once it is ready. Then there is translation. Collaboration is very, very strong. Collaboration means sharing your stories with others. That is very easily done. Scheduling, job scheduling and data load scheduling, and then your advanced API and software development kits, SDK. Those are used for extensions and your application development. So all this is part of SAC. In our training, we'll be focused on the business intelligence and the enterprise planning, specifically on enterprise planning. Augmented analytics, which are advanced features. If time permits, we will go into that as well. Okay. All right. Now, I told you that this is a cloud-based solution. So that means SAP has collaborated with different cloud providers. Who are different cloud providers? We have Microsoft Azure, who gives cloud solutions. Then we have your Amazon Web Services. They provide the cloud solutions. Then we have Google Cloud Platform. They also provide cloud solutions, right? So that means they have all the data centers. We have a term called data center. What is a data center? Data center is a building where you have these huge machines where your data is actually hosted. When you say cloud, what is cloud? Cloud is nothing but these data centers where your data is stored, where your applications are hosted, where your data is stored. That is what is called data centers. That means you are not storing the data on your machine or in your premise. Somebody else is storing your data. Somebody else is hosting your applications. And that place where it is hosted is called a data center. And SAP has collaborated with Azure, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, with Google for Google Cloud Platform. And because of that collaboration across the globe, SAP has different data centers and regions. And on these different regions and data centers, your applications and your data will be hosted. So if you are in Germany, then accordingly, your data center might be Europe. If you are in India, then your data center might be close to India, right? It might not be exactly in India, but it might be close to India. If you are in North America, it might be in US or Canada. If you are in, as I told you, Asia Pacific, then we have Tokyo, Japan, we have Shanghai, Singapore, Australia, we have Brazil, and etc. So these are all the different data centers which will host your application and your data. That is what is called cloud. See, cloud is a big term for outsourcing your data to someone else. Basically, that's what is cloud. You are not hosting on your machine. Somebody else is doing it for you and providing it via a URL, which you can access through browser. That is what is cloud. So basically, these data centers are responsible for giving you that functionality. Because someone has to have to store that data, someone has to host that application, and that someone is these data centers. Okay. Now, the architecture from a reporting standpoint in SAC. If you are a simple reporting client, you don't need planning at all. You just need reporting and dashboarding from SAC. Then how will it look like? So it will look like this, something like this. This is a very simplified version, but this is an important one to understand. Again, complexities can be added to this, but in a nutshell, this is what happens. This is your SAC box. Okay. Again, this is completely cloud-based. And then these are your sources. Either you can have BW for HANA as a source or S4HANA as a source in this example. But that does not mean that these can be your only sources. No. There can be multiple sources. There can be non-SAP sources as well. But just for simplification, I have shown these most frequently used SAP sources. BW for HANA and S4HANA. If your source is S4HANA, then the objects you will create is a CDS view. If your source is BW for HANA, then the object which will give the data to SAC is your BW query. Okay, as we know, BEX is no longer there in BW. We will have BW queries, and then those queries will become the source. Eclipse-based BW queries, those will become the source. If the source is S4HANA, then you'll have to create something called a CDS view, which we will cover in our training. And then that CDS view sends data to SAC. What do they send? Usually they send actual data. So these will send actual data. Because this is a simple reporting scenario, there is no planning. So actual data is sent from either S4HANA or BW for HANA, whatever is the scenario. It will go through a connection. So connection is a mandatory thing. You have to create a connection. Okay. So through a connection, it goes and sits in a model. Okay. You can have live connection or you can have import data connection. When it is live, that means data will not store here. Only metadata will store here. What is metadata? Metadata is just the information about the story. Like for example, what are the dimensions and what are the measures, that information. Then your SSO single sign-on information. And then your translation, if you are doing some language, different language and translation, that kind of data. So not the actual data, not the actual transaction data, just the metadata will be stored in the live model type. But if it is import connection, import model type, that means the data will be extracted from the source and stored in the model. That is the difference between live and import. But both needs connection. Please remember that. Okay. So connection is very important. So once you create a connection, then you can load the data from your source and either store it in the model or you can have a live, that means real-time reporting. And then once the data is there, once a model is created, and then you will create something called reporting stories, and those stories will get the data from the model. So this is the simple architecture for a reporting scenario. And then we will have users who will access those reports and then analyze the data and take decisions. For BW for HANA, it will be a similar concept, but the only change is the object which you will create is query, and that query will send again actual data through a connection. It can be a live connection or import data connection into a model. And then on top of the model, you create a story, and then the reporting users will use those stories. That is the very simplified version of how SAC reporting and dashboarding looks like. So as a developer, what will you do? You'll have to create CDS view. You'll have to create a connection. You'll have to create a model, and you'll have to create a story. Sometimes there is a different team for source. So you might not have access to create CDS views. A source team, S4HANA team, will say, no, we will not give you access. You are just an SAC developer. We will tell you that just use this CDS view. So in that case, you will just take that CDS view and then create a connection to that CDS view to the S4HANA, use that CDS view, create the model, create the story, and give it to the user. But if you are the sole developer who is responsible to create CDS views also, then you will have to do this work as well. Similarly, in BW, if there is a separate team, then you will not be given access to create queries. You will just be provided the name of the query, and then you will use that query. You will create the connection to BW, use that query, create the model, create the story, and then give it to the user. So that's what happens in a project, in a simple reporting project. Again, there might be other complexities involved, but I am just simplifying this for a basic understanding. For a planning, it's a different scenario, slightly different. This is planning. So in planning, again, source remains the same. We have the CDS views in S4HANA. We have the queries in BW for HANA. Actual data via a connection now goes into the planning model. This was an analytic model. In our reporting scenario, if you observe this was an analytic model. In the planning scenario, the model type is different. We have something called a planning model, and it has a version dimension to differentiate between actual and plan. Here, you don't need to differentiate between actual and plan, okay? But you can still have the version dimension. And that version dimension will only have one value, which is public.actual. That will signify that this is just actual data. So you will have version, you can have version here as well. But here version plays a more important role, because version will actually tell you whether it's a planned data or it's an actual data. So here the workflow is like this. So I'm taking S4HANA example. You create a CDS view, load the actual data through a connection, and now you see there is no live. Here in the reporting scenario, there was a live option, but in the planning, we don't use live because planning requires data to be loaded in SAC. Okay. In future, this might change. With DataSphere, it might work with the live connection, but right now we don't have DataSphere into the equation. We simply have the source and the SAC. So we will always use an import data connection, and we will actually load the transaction data and the master data into the planning model. And that planning model is of type, that model is of type planning. Whereas in the reporting, the model type was analytic. Okay. Once the actual data is sitting in the model, then what the planners do, then there is a separate user group. We had the reporting users previously, but now in the planning scenario, we have a separate group of people who are called planners. They are the people who are responsible to forecast and plan the data for the company for future years, for upcoming years. For say, for example, if you are in current year, then these planners will take the data in current year and see how the company performed. And based on that, they will predict or they will plan, they will put some forecasted data for the next year or next to next year for next 2 years also. So horizon depends from company to company. Sometimes it is, they do next month onwards. Sometimes they do next year onwards, up to 2 years. It can also go up to 5 years sometimes. So what these planners will do, they will use a story which is of type planning story, planning enabled story. That planning enabled story is also called input stories. Sometimes it is also called input schedules. Sometimes it is also called input forms. And sometimes others will use the word input template. Please don't get confused with these jargons. These are different naming conventions used across different organizations. In my experience, I have seen people using input templates, and I've also seen people using input schedules, and also the developers use the term input stories. It's one and the same thing. It's basically a type of a story which allows you to write the data. Usually, these reporting stories will only allow you to read the data, not write the data back into the model. But these input stories or input schedules or input forms, templates, whatever you want to call them, they are being used by planners, and then the data is saved. When they press the save button on this particular story and publish button, there is two buttons, save and publish. So when they hit that save and publish button, it goes and stores the data. That means it writes the data, the planned data, into the model. Which model? This is the same model in which the actual data also got loaded. Okay. So you can use the same model. Then how will it be differentiated? That's where your version will come into picture. The version for this data will be planned. The version for this data will be actual. That's how you can easily differentiate in the model that, okay, this data is planned data and this data is actual data. But that is done by the planners using input stories. Again, this is nothing fancy, nothing too complicated. This is just a type of story which will allow you to write the data back into the model. That is what is called input stories. That's why I've shown it separately from reporting stories, because reporting stories will only allow you to read it, not write back. So that's why we have these two types of stories. And once the data is written back, then finally it is shown in the reporting. And for the reporting users, these reporting users might be different from the planners, but sometimes the planners are the reporting users also. It might happen. Okay, I've seen that scenario as well. But usually the planners are different and the final reporting users are different with a little bit of overlap. It is not exactly like this, that they are absolutely a different set. There might be people common in both these user fraternity. So planners user will have maybe, pure planners, and also managers. Managers will plan, plus they will also use those report to analyze. So those are your common people. And then there will be only reporting users who will just read the data and take the decisions. So that's why there is an overlap. Some people might be common between these two user personas, but usually they are separated out. That's why I have separated out, but there will be common people for sure. Okay. Same thing for BW for HANA as well. Actual data from an import data connection loads into planning model. Okay, version will be actual for that. And then planners will come, use the input stories, write the data back into the same planning model. And then those planning plus actual data gets reported using reporting stories, which is a read-only story. And those reporting users will get both the data, actual data and planned data. And then they will do variance analysis. Variance analysis means the difference between actual and plan. I planned that we will do $100, but the actual says we only did $98. So then they will analyze that why we fell short of our plan, and those kind of analysis is done. But basically, this is the architecture of a planning scenario, a planning project in a company. Okay. So that concludes the architecture side of it. So this is the architecture. We have the overall architecture, which tells you that what are the capabilities of SAC. Then we have a simplified version for reporting only, and then we have for planning only. All right. Now, before I go into the connections overview, I will take a pause here and I will open the forum for any questions on the content covered so far. Please go ahead. And please raise your hand. I will not be taking ad hoc questions just like that. Please raise your hand, and then accordingly, we will take a question. Okay, Jyoti, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Devanshu. I didn't understand the version dimensions for planning model for actual and plan. It was little confusing for me.
Okay,
So-
okay. So version dimension means it's a field in the, so understand this. So if we have an Excel sheet, in an Excel sheet, we will have 4 different columns. We will have customer, we will have product, we will have sales quantity, and then we will have a version. So the same customer for a particular product will have 98 stored as a sales quantity for actual. But the plan for the same customer for the same product was 100. So these are 2 separate set of data. How will you differentiate that this is a plan data which the planners have inputted and versus the actual data which is loaded? So what will happen is that column, which will be your version, will tell you that, okay, this row is plan and the second row is actual. So there will be 2 rows sitting in my model. One row will tell customer C001, product P001, quantity 98, version public.plan. And row 2 will say customer C001, product P001, sales quantity is 100, but the version is public.actual. That's how you will differentiate between planned data and actual data. So it's basically a column in your model, just like a column in an Excel sheet, which tells you the differentiation between plan versus actual data sitting in the same model. Because you are writing the same, you are writing data in the same model, actual also, plan also. Then how will you differentiate? So that's the column which will give you that differentiation.
So so the basic thing is the input templates have the same structure of that of the planning model structure, table structure that we will be having.
That's right. That's right. So the input stories will have the same structure, or it might have a little bit of higher level structure. Usually it is the same structure, but it might have higher level. Higher level means, say, for example, there is something called material in my planning model, but the planners, they don't plan at a material level. They will plan at a material group level. Okay. So it might, so material group will also be there in the planning model, but material will also be there in the planning model. But the planners, they are putting the plan at a group level, not at a material level. In that scenario, the material will be blank or hash. Only the material group will be populated for the planned data. But for actual data, the material is populated because the actual is at a material granularity. So it might be the same. The granularity might be the same, or maybe it might be a little bit higher than the planning model. The input template or input story granularity might be same or a little bit higher. But whatever fields they are using in the input story or template has to be there, okay, in the planning model.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks, Devanshu.
No problem. Angie, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Devanshu. So regarding connections, so if we want to connect SAC to any source like S4 or BW4, is there any prerequisite like we need to install something either in source or target? And also same
Yes,
thing like
yes, there are. And as I told you, one of the next topic is connections. So we will have that detail very shortly. You will see that.
Okay, thank you.
Shri Vishwanath, go ahead.
Hi, Devanshu. So, when connecting to BW queries, we also have, for planning scenarios, we also have input ready queries. So, do we really not use them when going for planning models by connecting to BW systems?
Sorry, come again.
So,
Oh, you're
i-
talking about the input ready queries in BW itself.
yes,
Yeah, we don't use that. So
okay,
input ready queries in BW is used for planning which is happening in BW itself. Like for example, your integrated planning, IP, or
Mhm.
your BPC embedded, right? Which is very, very tightly integrated with BW. And that input ready query, which you will create in BW, is for integrated planning scenario. That means planning is happening within BW. Here, the scenario is completely different. You are not doing planning in BW. You are doing planning in SAC. That's why input ready queries are not relevant at all here. All the input ready queries are called input templates or input stories or input schedules in SAC, and that you will use. So here, input ready queries are not relevant at all.
So when we write the plan data back to the planning models, we are restricting that plan data or storing it only at SAC level, not to the
That's right.
underlying system.
That's correct.
Okay.
Plan data will not go and write back to BW. No, BW here is just a source for actual data, not plan. Everything related to planning will sit in the planning model within SAC.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Shoyan Dey, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Devanshu. So actually, I wanted to know, like, is the connection available for the older versions of SAP, like BW on HANA or for ECC on HANA DB?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. It can connect to, in fact, ECC on traditional database also, Oracle or your DB2 or etc., whatever it is. It is also
Okay.
available for traditional BW also, BW on Oracle, BW on SQL, BW on DB2. So it's available, yes.
Okay, and another question related to the there is no scenario. Is there any scenario in real life which happens, like writing the data back to like S4 HANA or B4 HANA, or for in the from the planning perspective?
Yeah, it does. It does happen. So that is what is called write backs. So we can
Okay.
write the data back to your target system, which will be the same system where you got the data, the actual data from. Yes, those are called write back scenario. It happens on both the system, PW also and S4 also. And that is what is called write back. And that we will do when you have some planning done or you need the planning data in S4 also, or you need the planning data in BW4 also. So sometimes what happens is like this, see. So you are doing planning in SAC, okay? But the final reporting is not happening in SAC. Example, final reporting is happening in Power BI. And Power BI reporters, they need the plan and the actual both. Now, planning is not happening in BW. Example, planning is happening in SAC. So first BW will send the actual data. It will go and sit in the planning model. Then planners will put the plan data via the input stories into the planning model. And then the data gets written back to BW. And then the Power BI will get the actual and plan data both, and they will do the reporting. So write backs happen when your source needs the plan data for final reporting, which is happening not in SAC, but in a separate third-party tool.
Okay, so in that case, like from SSC, again, we can't send data directly to Power BI, or Power BI can't pull data directly from SSC.
It's very complicated. It can, but usually it is complicated. It's not very seamless. But when you write the data back into BW for HANA or S4 HANA, then Power BI can very easily connect.
Okay, so this write back is covered in your training session?
No, write back is not covered because write back needs certain specific type of connectivity between your SAC and your source system, which is an OData write back connectivity. And for that, you need certain APIs to be activated. So that API is having an issue in my current landscape. So that's why I am not covering write backs. But on a theoretical basis, if you want to see how a write back is done, what are the details, what is the configuration, etc., I can show you in theory, but not in the system, unfortunately. I'm trying my best to get that to work. If I'm able to succeed, then I'll show you. Otherwise, no. Rani, go ahead, please.
Hi Devanshu, my doubt is what is the differentiate of actual data and transactional data in SAC?
Both are the same. Actual data is nothing but your transaction data. Now, actual data can also include master data. Please don't forget that. Master data means your customer IDs and customer name, your plant ID and your plant description, your cost center ID and your cost center description, and cost center hierarchies, if you have any hierarchies also. That is called master data. So we will load both. When I say actual data, it is transaction data plus master data.
So what is the limitation of SAC, Devanshu? And what we can't do, we can do reporting and planning in SAC. Other than that, what we can't do with SAC?
What you cannot do with SAC? There are very few things you cannot do with SAC, I think. See, planning is possible, reporting is possible. I told you digital boardroom, that kind of reporting is also possible. We have group reporting now, which is consolidation, that is also possible. I don't know what is currently not possible. Yeah, there are limitations for sure. See, for example, to load the data, there are some limitations. If you go beyond those limitations, then the loading of data will fail. Then you have certain limitations on live reporting. So if you have live reporting, means you're not loading data, you're just creating the model, just creating the story, and then executing those stories. Those stories in the real time will go back to the source and fetch the data in real time. In that scenario, we have certain limitations like blending. There is something called blending, data blending. That doesn't work usually seamlessly with live reporting. Hierarchies, they sometimes give an issue with live reporting. So there are certain restrictions and scenarios which, with every new release, these restrictions are being addressed. So there is an SAP documentation which will tell you that what live reporting can do, what it cannot do, what import data connection can do, what it cannot do. So there are certain limitations there.
Thank you, Devanshu.
No problem. Sairam, please go ahead.
Hi, Devan.
Hello. Sorry, I can't, I can barely hear you. Sorry, Ram. Can't hear you. I'll have to get back to you. Probal, go ahead.
Hi, Devanshu. I wanted to know for models with a live connection type. So how does the data security or authorization function for respective users? Because
That is completely driven through your source. So if you have BW, then you will have to have the roles and authorizations defined in BW that will be respected for live connection. If you have S/4HANA, the CDS view will have the authorizations and roles restrictions defined that will be restricted. So it's primarily it is driven from the source system in the live connection scenario. Very few things you can control. What you can control is that what are the folders and what are the stories the users can see, but what data they can see, that is driven by the source itself for the live.
so when the connection happens from SAC to BW or S4, the ID of the user is sent to the target system, and then based on the authorization, the data is brought forward.
Yeah, that's right. That's how the SSO will work. SSO will need to be established between SAC and your source, and then they don't need to log in twice. Otherwise, they will have to log in twice. So it depends. If you have used so connection will use a credential. Either the connection will use a credential or it will use a SAML, single sign-on. So if it's using a credential, then the connection will use that credential and log into your source system and get you the data. In that case, you don't need every user to be created because that single user ID is getting the data for you. Because when you create a connection, you can give that credential, user ID, password. But if it's a single sign-on SAML, then it has to be established for every user, and that's where your user IDs will have to be mapped. Okay, Ankit, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Devanshu. So just asking if we can use a live connection in planning model as well. And the second thing is like if we are doing the import data job in the planning model, then the authorization will not come into the picture. Then how we are going to control the storage data from the users?
Okay. First question, can planning be done on a live model? Currently, no. Planning is not possible on the live model. You have to load the data and store it in the planning model. Second question is, how will we control the authorizations? So we have security concept in SAC. It's a very robust security concept. You will have something called, so security is defined at a teams level. So you will create a team, and then there are roles. You will assign the roles to the teams. And then at a granular level, you will assign something called a data access control, DAC. So that data access control will drive that which user under which team can access what data. So that kind of granular access control also is provided in SAC.
Okay, when we are importing the data, then what is the volume restrictions on a planning model, that how much data we can load at once in a planning model? Because in one of my scenario, I have 137 million records in a planning model in a single planning model. So is there any such restrictions here as well in SAC?
Yes, there are certain restrictions. I will discuss the restrictions shortly. When I will talking about the connections, you will see the restrictions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I can take maybe two more questions. Unfortunately, I will not be able to take a lot because we already have a dedicated Q&A at the end, and I have to cover a lot of content as well. So I'll take Mandeep. Go ahead.
Hey, Devanshu, thank you. My question is, the import connection which we are using for planning model, does it use OData service or any other?
No, that is not an OData connection. That's the regular import data connection, which will so basically drivers are already given for SAP source systems. Okay. When the drivers are already given, and when I say drivers, I mean the ODBC and JDBC drivers. So that driver is already embedded in SAC for identifying the SAP source systems. When you don't have SAP source systems, those drivers are not is there, then you will go for open data protocol. OData means open data. Open data means it is open to non-SAP and third party also. That's where you will use OData. And also for write backs, we use OData. But this connection is your regular connection, which identifies through the embedded drivers inside SSC that this is a BW for HANA or S4 HANA because it's SAP source system.
Okay, understand. Because why I'm asking is, recently I understand with DataSphere as a backend, we need to have a separate OData service for each individual model.
Yeah, the data sphere, when it comes into picture, yes, you will have to use OData. But for this simple source to SAC, this is not OData.
Understand. Thank you.
All right, last question. We will take, let's see, Murthy. Go ahead.
Hi, Devanshu. My question is, I mean, from planning or reporting, whatever we have gone through from architecture perspective, what is the volume, I mean, that we can process? I mean, whether it is input layout or whether it is, input form or schedule, as you mentioned, or from a reporting as a story. What is is there any limitation that we have to stick with? Maximum?
So yes, I'll shortly discuss the limitations also. But in terms of the actual data volume of transaction data which a planning model can store, I don't know the exact number of records limitation, but definitely it is less than 2 billion. So if it is up to 2 billion, the model can easily handle it. But when it is more than 2 billion, then certain issues will start coming into picture because internally, right, it is all in the HANA cloud. And HANA cloud, these models are basically HANA cloud tables at the end of the day, like fact underscore data, which I was telling you yesterday. So HANA can handle 2 billion records in one partition And then after that, you have to partition the data, partition the tables. So each partition can have 2 billion each. So the highest what I have seen in my current project, which is a bomb explosion product costing. So it has around 1.3 billion records, and we have it in the planning model. So please understand that SAC, the database where the data is getting stored is HANA Cloud. And the limitations, what will kick in will be your HANA limitations, if any. Okay. SAC itself doesn't have its own limitation. It is limited by the database it is using, and the database it is using is your HANA in the cloud. Again, this is not on-premise, this is again HANA Cloud. And it has a 2 billion limit without a partition table. If you partition the table, then it can handle more. But 2 billion, you can think that as your limit.
Okay, thanks, Dipanshu. Because if we are connecting more than these two sources, what we are seeing as CDS views or queries, like Oracle Fusion or any other third-party ERPs. I was just thinking from that sense how much it can process. Thanks,
Right. No problem.
So
And it is an or scenario.
Yeah.
Just because I'm showing both of them usually does not have that both are loading actual data and then you have separate stories here for separate story. It's an either or condition. Either you will have S/4HANA as your source for actuals, or you will have BW for HANA. If you have multiple systems in your company, and like for example, you said Fusion, Oracle Fusion is there, JD Edwards is there, your SQL Server is there, and you have to consolidate data before sending it to SAC, then BW will be your middleware. BW will consolidate data, then BW will create a query which will have data from all those systems consolidated, and then that actual will become the single source of actuals for your SAC. But if that is not the scenario, if only S4 is your source for actuals, then this scenario will come into picture.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, guys. So I will have to please ask you to retain your questions. Please hold on to them, because if we go into that spiral, then we will not be able to cover the content, and I have a lot today. So I would really request you to hold on to your questions. And it's 9:15 and almost 10. Let's take a 10 minutes break, and then we will come back at 10:10. So my time right now is 9:59 a.m. So I will be back by 10:10 a.m. and then we will continue. Thank you very much. I'll be back. All right, guys, I'm back. And I've resumed the recording, and I've resumed the screen sharing as well. So let's continue. I was looking into the chat, and a lot of people are asking what is BOM. I have been using that term BOM a lot. So I think people have already answered. Thank you for your contributions to answer the question. I might not be able to answer everyone's question, but we will have a dedicated Q&A at the end, so you can ask those. And please don't think that any question is a silly question. In fact, it's a good question if you want to know what is a BOM. BOM is basically or bomb explosion, I would say, is basically, for example, for creating a bicycle, right? What is the process of creating that bicycle? So for that bicycle, you need the raw material. So you need a seat, you need the body, you need the tires, you need the bell, and you might need few more things. So all that is your raw material. And the finished good, the final product is your bicycle, right? So when I say a product, my product is my bicycle, finished good. But if I want to explode the bill of material, or I want to explode and see what is that bicycle made of, so basically that bomb explosion is going into the detail of a finished good, how it is prepared, by what raw material it was prepared, what quantity of that raw material was used. Okay, that is called quantity structure. And then what are the different activities we had to do? So we had to we have to assemble the bike, right? So the body is first attached, then the seat is attached on the body, then the handle is input in there, then you have to put the tires, and then you have to do the bell, installation of the bell. So all these are called different activities. So bomb explosion means you are exploding the finished product into the details of what went through in creating that final finished product, which is a bicycle. You had to create all the material, so all the raw material, okay? That is called bill of material. Bill of material means all the raw material plus packaging also. Sometimes packaging is also included because you have to package and you have to send it to the customer if you want to. But simply understand bill of material is taking the final product and exploding it down to its raw component. What is it made of? A bicycle is made of the body, the seat, the cover, the bell, the handle, etc. So those are all your material, raw material. Bill of material means how much it costed. So the body costed me 100 rupees, the bell costed me 5 rupees, the tires costed me 200 rupees. So these are all your quantity, and I need only one handle, I need only one body, I need one bell, but I need 2 tires. So that is your quantities, right? So basically, bill of material is exploding the final product into its raw material and the quantities, how much each raw material was required, and then also the activities, what activities went into assembling that. That is why the data, when the bomb is exploded, so you can imagine a company produces thousands of finished product. Finished product means the final product. If you explode that into its raw material, each finished product might be made up of 10 different components, right? 10 different raw materials. So 10 into your 10,000 becomes your 100,000. If the raw material is maybe 100 raw material sometimes, then 1,000 into 100 becomes a million, and 10 million, 100 million. That's why the data gets exploded, because you are now exploding your finished product into its raw material. Okay, I hope that answers the question. All right, so let's continue. Again, don't worry if you have a question and it is not answered yet. I will open up the session at the end for the remaining questions. So till the time being, till that time, please be on mute and hold on to your questions. So now let's discuss the connections. So we know that connection is a mandatory thing. In the architecture, we saw that connection is required for both live and import data. For reporting, it can be either one of them. You can have live also, you can have import also. Both will work with reporting. But for planning, you have to use import. That means you have to load the data in the model. So connections, expanding on the connections, there are different types of connections. Now we know that there are 2 types of connections. We have live data connection and we have import data connection. So on the right hand side, this is live data. On the left hand side, this is import data. Okay. On the first top half, it is cloud data sources. On the bottom half, it is on-premise data sources. So this is how this diagram is formatted. Left side, import data, right side, live, and top half cloud, bottom half on-prem. So let's take the live data first. So if you are creating a live connection, that means you are not storing the data in the model. It will be real time. What will model store? So model will still be there. Okay, please don't think that because it's a live, you don't need a model. No, you do need a model in both the cases, in live and import. But the model, what will it store is different between the two. For live, it will only store the metadata, not the actual transaction data. For import data, it will store the metadata plus your transaction data also. So for the live, we can have first half, as I told you, is cloud sources. That means my source is also another cloud product. Like SAC is a cloud product. right? DataSphere is a cloud product. S/4HANA Cloud is a cloud product. IBP, Integrated Business Planning, is a cloud product. Your Ariba is a cloud product. So if the source is a cloud product and you are using live data connection, then they will use the native connectors. Cloud data sources will have its native connectors. Cloud to cloud connectivity is very, very easy. That means because cloud understands the language of another cloud. Because clouds, they use the same language of JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and other internet or cloud or web related technologies, right? So they will understand each other very easily, and that's why connecting a cloud source to SAC is simpler than connecting a on-premise source where you need certain other configurations also. So it will use the cloud application native adapters, which we call open connectors capability, open connectors or cloud connectors. Usually it is OData, right? OData stands for Open Data Protocol. So that means it understands the language of the web. It understands the language of the cloud. And what is the language of the cloud? JavaScript is the language of the cloud. HTML, UI5 is the language of the cloud. CSS is the language of the cloud. We have JSON, right? JavaScript object notification. JSON is the language of the cloud. So all those programming languages or technologies used in the cloud is understood by OData. And that's why the OData technology is used when you connect one cloud source to another cloud target, which is your SAC in our case. That's why you will see we will have DataSphere, HANA Cloud, HANA Service from BTP, IBP, S/4HANA Cloud. All these are SAP's cloud sources. It can very easily connect via OData to SAP Analytics Cloud. Okay, then you have your non-SAP sources also which we can connect. But non-SAP sources also needs a little bit of a configuration, even if it's a cloud, because it's non-SAP. So you have to, but still it will use the open data connectivity OData, and then you can easily load the data. As you can see, we can have here we have only shown the SAP related cloud sources, but non-SAP related cloud sources, they are also now gradually becoming available to be connected to SAC. And again, the OData, open data protocol, will be used. But if it is an on-premise source, again, I'm just talking about live now. We are currently focusing on only live data connection. So if it is an on-premise source, what is on-premise? On-premise means that product is not in cloud. It is installed in your local machine, in your local data center, in your company. Okay. So that is called on-prem. So for example, BW on HANA or BW for HANA is your on-premise data sources. S/4HANA, not cloud. Simple S/4HANA is your on-premise source. Okay. So on-premise source means it will be behind a particular firewall of the company, because that product is installed in a machine which is there in the company's premise, not in the cloud. So that's why it's called on-premise. So if it is live connection for an on-premise source, then there are two types of live connection. We have direct live connection and we have tunnel live connection. Both are part of live connection. Direct connection is preferred, it's easier and it's faster. Tunnel live connection is not preferred, it's slower, and it is only used when you want to provide access to the SAC stories outside your organization without using a VPN. If you are using a VPN, then direct connection is fine. If someone outside your company wants to access the SAC stories and you want to give the access to them, but you also want to make sure that your data is secured and it is not misused, then you will use tunnel connection, but it is a live connection type. Both direct and tunnel are used for live data connection. These are your sources which are supported for direct. We have your BW for HANA, the traditional BW, SAP HANA, on-prem SAP HANA, SAP S4 HANA, SAP Universe, etc. And then for tunnel connection, we have BW for HANA, BW, SAP HANA, and S4 HANA. Universe is not there because it is not compatible with the tunnel connection. And for tunnel connection, you will use something called a BTP Cloud Connector or SAP Cloud Connector. But for direct connection, you will use a different technology which is called CORS, Cross Object Resource Sharing, CORS. So for direct live connection, CORS. For tunnel live connection, the BTP Cloud Connector or the SAP Cloud Connector. And for the cloud to cloud, for live, it is OData connection, Open Data Protocol. When we come to import data now, then we have again cloud sources and we have the on-prem sources. For cloud sources, for third-party applications, again, the open connectors capability, which is the OData, will be used. For cloud from SAP, these are the SAP sources. For import data connection, Concur, Fieldglass, Google Drive. Again, those cloud applications will understand each other. We can easily import the data from that cloud into SAC. But if it's an on-prem, that means it is not a cloud base and you want to import data from them, then you will have to use SAC agent and SAP Cloud Connector. These are the two different software you have to install. And where you have to install? You have to install on the on-premise system. You have to install the SAC agent and SAP Cloud Connector in the local network. Okay. It will sit on top of your on-prem sources, or it will sit inside the on-prem sources, and it will be a bridge between your cloud, which is your SAC, and your on-prem. Because the cloud language and the on-prem language are different. And these guys, the SAC agent and the SAP Cloud Connector, now called BTP Cloud Connector, is responsible to translate the language spoken by the on-prem sources and the language spoken by the cloud product, which is SAC in our case. And because we have a firewall also, so that's why it is important that it is these softwares are installed on the local network. Local network means on the client's network, either on the same source where we are taking data from, or in a different machine, but that machine should be there on the local client network. Okay, not in the cloud. So then these cloud connector and SAC agent will translate the language spoken by these guys and the language understood by the SAC, and then it will have a seamless import data between these systems. That means data can be successfully imported or extracted from the on-premise sources into SAC. So in a gist, in a nutshell, understand like this. For import data, for on-prem, the language is different because on-prem and SAC, because it's SAC's cloud, speaks different language. So they need a translator, an intermediate software or intermediate infrastructure. And that intermediate infrastructure is your SAC agent and SAP Cloud Connector for import data, and CORS or SAP Cloud Connector for live. Okay, for on-prem. Because on-prem and cloud speak different languages. That's why you need these intermediates. For live, CORS and SAP Connector. For on-prem, SAC agent and SAP Cloud Connector. Okay. If your data sources are OData, SAP BPC, NetWeaver, IBP, S4 HANA, then you don't need the SAC agent. But if your source systems is BPP Microsoft, BW for HANA, BW, etc., then you also need SAC agent plus your SAP Cloud Connector, and then it can successfully talk to SAC. So this is in a nutshell the connectivity overview between live data connection and import data connection. Okay, I have given a link for the SAP help documentation. If you want, you can go through that, which will give you further details on that. Now, your question is, which one should I use? When? How will I decide? Do I need live connection or do I need data acquisition, which is nothing but your import data? Data acquisition, don't get confused by the terminology. This is nothing but your import data connection. So how will you decide? Okay, so this is a picture which will give you a little bit of an idea of what criteria you should take into consideration for decision making. Which one should you use, live or import? If you want real-time data and you want to have real-time reporting, then live connection is your way to go. No data is replicated. That means your data will stay in your source system secure. So no data will be stored in the cloud. User security controlled by the remote source. No need to recreate authorization models. So this was one of the questions. Authorizations are driven by your source. That means your data security, whatever you have implemented on the source side, will kick in and will keep your data secure. Minimal model administration on SAC. So SAC, you don't need to do any complex modeling. It's a simple live model. You don't do a lot of transformations on the SAC side for live. Most of the transformations and most of the complexities are there already in the source system, and you just reuse that. So it is real-time reporting plus data being secured in your company. It's not going out of your company, and also your security authorizations will be driven by the source. Whereas in the import data, you can have planning and predictive capabilities. So if your requirement is doing planning and predictive, then you cannot do live. You have to load the data. So if your requirement is planning and predictive, then you have to go for import data. If you want to transform data on the SAC side, then you go for import data. If you have basically performance issues, performance is very, very important for you, and you are having huge data and you are facing performance issues, then go for import data, because live data on a huge volume will have performance implications. And more features are supported than live connection. That means, like, for example, data blending, your just ask, which is your conversational analytics, and many more predictive functionalities, predictive forecasting. So all those features will only be supported on the import data. It will not be supported on the live data. But you have to also keep in mind that not all data sources support live connection. Many of the data sources, they will support only import data connection. So these are your certain criteria you have to ask yourself. What is the business requirement? Is your business requirement planning, or is your business requirement real-time reporting only? If it is real-time reporting, go for live. If it is planning, then go for import data. Do you have performance and you have huge data, and are you facing performance issues? Yes, then go for import data. If no, then go for live data. Do you need huge transformation capabilities in SAC? If yes, go for import data. Otherwise, go for live data. Is your data source supported in live? No, then of course you don't have a choice. You have to go with import data. But if your data source is supported in live connectivity and you don't want to send data to cloud, your data is very, very sensitive, you want to keep it in your company firewall, then go for live data connection. So you have to evaluate what is your business requirement and accordingly choose. This is just a table I have given to take the decision easier, to make the decision easier by doing the comparison. Direct live connection, tunnel live connection. This is part of the live. As we saw, we have two types of live connection: direct live and tunnel live. Direct will use CORDS, tunnel will use the SAC cloud connector. So what are the things? Performance analysis without data. See, the keyword is, I've highlighted the keywords: without data replication. In live connections, your data does not get stored and replicated in SAC. Okay, so that is one of the key factors. Confidential data stays in the customer landscape. Security implementation is driven from the source system. Whatever existing developments you have done in your source, you can leverage that and just do simple reporting and real-time reporting. Okay. And you can have SSO also, end-to-end single sign-on. SSO stands for single sign-on via simple access markup language, SAML. That's the technology, SAML 2.0. which is used for single sign-on. For tunnel live connection, it is ideal. When will you go for tunnel live connection? When you want to expose your data to users outside your corporate network without giving them VPN. So they don't have VPN, they still want to use the SSC stories, then go for tunnel connection, because that secures your data, and also that will work without VPN. But the problem with that is it is slower than direct live. So you might have some performance issues there, but CORS configuration is not required there. You need SAC agent there, SAP Analytics Cloud agent or BTP agent. Data is temporarily moved to SAC because for tunnel, because it is not using the CORS, it is temporarily moved. As soon as the story is closed, then the data is truncated or purged from SAC. Tunnel live connections are not supported for universes. As you can see, the universes, the SAP universe is not supported. What is an SAP universe? SAP universe is an on-premise tool, which is a part of business objects, BobJ. So if you have heard of SAP BobJ, these SAP universes are a part of the SAP BobJ tool suite. So those are not supported. So that is just the gist of the details of what type of connections within live, what type of connections within import data are there. Again, if you want to go further details into it, we have a link for that as well. And this is what is the limitations I was talking about. So when you import the data, there are certain limitations. And what are the data volume limitations? The data volume limitations is columns up to 100, rows 800,000. 800,000 rows, this is, I think, increased now. As I told you, this limitation is driven by the HANA cloud limitation, and the total volume which you can easily load and without any issues, without any dumps, is up to 2 billion. But this 800,000 rows, I think this is an older one. So I'll update this. Dimension members, planning model 250,000. Yeah, dimension members means your master data of your dimensions. So if your customer has a dimension, then the planning models can have 250,000 up to that. Analytic models, if there are more than 250 unique members, then it will be made read-only. If it has attributes, if dimension has attributes, then 150,000 dimension members will be there. What do I mean by members? Members means the values. So customer, how many unique customer values it can have? 250,000. If it has attributes, how many unique customer values it can have? You will have 150,000. Dimension members with geo enrichment, that means maps. If you are using maps in SAC, then it is certain limitations are there. And in hierarchy, it can go up to 1,000 levels of hierarchy, and dimension members in hierarchy can be total 150,000. These limitations are augmented with every release. So don't think that this is a current version. It might be, augmented more with the future releases also, and the new releases. Every quarterly release cycle will have these volume limitations augmented. And transaction data, what I have seen, if you are loading from the source, which is the import data, then transaction data can go up to 2 billion. After 2 billion, it starts showing some issues and some errors, which again can be resolved by going into the HANA database layer by the administrators and then doing some partitioning on the model tables. But don't worry, up to 2 billion is handled in the planning model. And yeah, these limitations are there for master data. Some of the master data which you are loading for dimensions will have some limitations. Hierarchy will have some limitations, but transaction data doesn't have just this much limitation. It can go way beyond 800,000. It can go up to 2 billion. Okay. Next, standard versus professional. There was a question, what are the license type? We already discussed that. But what I'm going to show you is what are the features which are not available in standard but available in professional edition, and what are the features which are not there in the business intelligence edition. So as you can see, we have the difference between the standard planning and professional planning is create, update, and delete the planning model. So somebody mentioned yesterday about this. Yes, you're right, but the models can be used in the standard edition, but it cannot be updated or deleted or created in the standard edition. It can be done in the professional edition. Other than that, you can view it very easily. You can create private versions. I will talk about all this private versions and all those things. We will talk when we will go into the actual development in the real-time scenario. So don't worry. If you see some jargons and naming terminologies which you are not aware of, don't worry. We will cover this. So, but this is just an overview of what you can do and what you cannot do between planning, business intelligence, and planning professional. Planning standard, planning professional, and business intelligence. Another one which I've highlighted is data actions, including the allocation step. You cannot do that in business intelligence. You cannot do that in planning standard. You have to have planning professional to do that. But most of the things, as you can see, they are common between planning standard and planning professional, except for the ones which I've highlighted. And then again, we have established a connection from SAC to BPC. If you have a BPC, BPC stands for Business Planning and Consolidation. So this is an on-premise tool from SAP for planning. So SAC is basically the cloud version of planning, and BPC is the on-premise version of planning tool from SAP. So if you have to establish a connection between SAC and BPC, then planning professional will allow you, but standard will not allow you. And of course, business intelligence will not allow you. And then there are certain more limitations there. So in a nutshell, planning and planning standard and planning professional will let you do most of the things, except for data action, create or delete, and planning model, create or delete. Viewing the planning model, using the planning model, it is allowed in the standard. Okay, so that is the difference. And if you have analytic models, then it is all the functionalities are allowed in all the three different license types. This is for planning model. Okay, so we have two types of model as we saw in the architecture. We have the planning model, we have the analytic model, two types. So restrictions will apply for planning model separately amongst these three license types, and for analytic model, all the three license type will allow you to work with analytic models without any issues. The restrictions will come when it comes to planning models. Okay. All right. Now, some basic cloud terminologies. This might be very trivial and redundant for many people, but this is very important for absolute beginners and freshers who are, logging into SAC for the first time and logging into any cloud technology for the first time. That's why I've included this. So please bear with me. I'm going to quickly cover this and then go on to the next topic. So cloud means what? Cloud means that somebody else is hosting your data, somebody else is hosting your application, somebody else is hosting your platform. Example, Gmail. You use Gmail, right? Gmail, do you have to install any software for Gmail? No, we don't have to install any software. How do we access Gmail? We access Gmail via a URL. We say www.gmail.com. So what is happening there is you just type a URL. It is a service given by Google and it is a cloud-based service. That means you don't have to install any software on your machine. You don't have to install any hardware for this. Yeah, the only hardware what you need is a machine, a laptop or a desktop or your mobile phone or a handheld device just to have a browser in it, and then you can use the email service from Google. That is one of the examples of cloud product. Whereas if you want to use software like, for example, your VLC player, right? VLC player is a media player where you will play your songs, your videos, etc. Okay. So VLC player, you have to install that software in your machine. There will be an executable file. You will download that file from a website. Then you will do the installation and that will give you a the media player, which will play the songs for you, which can play the videos for you, and you can use that as an on-premise tool. That is called an on-premise software. Example of an on-premise software is a VLC player, right? Or standard Microsoft Media Player, where you have to install that. Yes, gradually they are also now having cloud versions, but essentially we have to if you want all the features and everything, then you have to install it in your local machine. That's what is called on-prem. And softwares which you will use without in any installation, like your Gmail, is your complete 100% cloud-based. Similarly, SAC is a complete 100% cloud-based. You don't need to install any software for that. You don't need to have any downloaded files and then install that file. All you need to do is buy the license or buy the trial, the free of cost ones, and then just use the URL in your browser and access it. That's the difference between on-prem and cloud. Within cloud, we have three types of cloud: public, private, and hybrid. Public means a cloud system which is shared between many customers. Private means that particular cloud will be private to your company only. And hybrid means that you will have a mixture of both. Some of the applications you are hosting on the public cloud, but some of the confidential data-driven applications you are hosting on your private cloud, which is specific to your company. That cloud space is dedicated for your company, and there will be more security in the private cloud compared to public cloud. But still, public cloud is also very, very secure. They have different tenants. Okay, it's not that because that public cloud space, that data center is shared by different clients, that your data can be leaked. No, there is a contract which is signed. In that, security agreements are there, security sections are there, that data will not be breached and your data will stay secure. But if you want extra security, then go for private cloud. Of course, you have to shell out more money here. And then you have hybrid also, a mixture of both. These are called deployment models, cloud deployment models. How do you want to deploy your software or application? In public cloud or private cloud or a mixture of both? And then there is something called service models. Okay, previous one was deployment models, and this is called service models, like what type of service you want to take in the cloud. Infrastructure as a service, IaaS, platform as a service, PaaS, and software as a service, SaaS. So these are the three primarily type of service models. What is the difference? Infrastructure means your hardware. You're only renting the hardware. That's it. The data will be yours. The application will be completely yours. You are just taking the hardware because you don't have the hardware, but everything else will be yours. In platform as a service, you are taking the hardware plus you are taking all the middleware as well. When I say middleware, that means deployment, like for example, for coding, you need an environment. That coding environment will be given to you. You have to compile and activate your code. That compilation and activation services will be given to you. What you will have to do from your side is your application. Application will be yours. You have to create your own application. And of course, data will be yours. You have to bring your own data. So only platform services will be given to you. Okay, but the application and data will be yours. In software as a service, the entire software or the application will be given to you. You don't have to do anything. Like for example, your Gmail. Gmail is an example of SaaS, software as a service. That means the entire software, the entire application is ready for you. All you need to do is create your own account and start using it as it is. That is software as a service. Okay. Infrastructure as a service is just hardware. Platform as a service is hardware plus middleware, which will help you to, compile your code. It will help you, for example, database. A database will be given to you in the platform to store your data. Compilation and integration technologies will be given to you, so on and so forth. Example of PaaS is BTP. SAP BTP is a platform as a service. You have to use that platform and create your own software. But software as a service is ready-made software is given to you, like your Netflix is one example. What you do for Netflix? Do you have to create that application? No. The company has already done the heavy lifting for you. All you need to do is subscribe, pay a monthly fee, and then all your movies, your web series, your games, etc., everything is available to you as a complete software. So that is a Netflix. SAC is a software as a service, because SAC is a complete application given to you. You just need to log into SAC, use that application, and load the data. So data will be yours. Okay. Of course, they cannot give data because data is specific to each company. So software is ready-made in SaaS. Platform means infrastructure and all the middleware, API, software, etc. are given to you. And IaaS is only hardware is given to you. Okay. So that is the different service models of cloud. That's what I've highlighted. IaaS, only hardware. PaaS, hardware plus middleware so that your application can smoothly run. And then software is complete application, or the complete software is given to you. SAC is SaaS, SaaS. Your BTP is PaaS, platform as a service. And your infrastructure as a service is like for your, if you go for Google Cloud platforms or Microsoft Azure, just take the platform infrastructure from them and you build your own middleware, you build your own software. So that is the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Okay. All right. BTP introduction. So, okay, somebody has mentioned in the chat also, like mobile can be considered as IaaS, and iOS or Android can be considered as platform, and your IO applications or Android, iOS applications and applications can be considered as SaaS. Yes, that can also be an example. But an easy to understand example is Gmail is your SaaS. Okay. And for platform as a service is your BTP. You can easily use. For hardware as a service, okay, so you use pen drive or thumb drive, right? Or your hard drive, external hard drive. That can be your infrastructure, IaaS. Only your hardware is given to you. You can then load your data, and then if you want, there is no application, there is no software, just hardware is given to you, and then you can use that hardware to store your data and your application software, etc. You can store there. So that is just an example of very crude example, I know, but just to easily understand it, that's hardware only. Hardware plus middleware is platform, and hardware plus middleware plus software is your SaaS, software as a service. All right. So I will take a pause here. It's already 10:51. I have a lot of content to cover for BTP. Okay. I think we will not have time today to cover BTP. Instead of the BTP, which will take at least half an hour for me, 15-20 minutes minimum. Instead of BTP we can cover in the next class. What I am going to do, because that's more important, I am going to cover the next two topics. The next two topics are, so BTP will take in the next class. Okay, let me take a note, next class. What I want to cover is, just want to show you in SAC where the coding requirement will kick in. And also in the system, I want to today create a simple model and simple story and give you this assignment. So you have to complete one assignment after the class today. And I have already uploaded the exercise file, the assignment file. I will show that to you. So using that exercise file, I want to create a simple model and simple story so that enough theory, at least we should start some hands-on today. And from next week onwards, of course, we will go more into hands-on and customer requirement. But today I want to cover this. That's why I'm just skipping the SAP BTP introduction, because this is going to take up a lot of time if I go for that. Okay. So let's go into SAC coding. Where exactly SAC coding will be required? So first of all, the question, okay. SAC coding, is it really required? Do we need to code? Like in BW, we need to code in ABAP. In planning, integrated planning, we need to code in ABAP for your planning function and your planning sequences, etc. And sometimes Fox formulas also. So that is all coding in your BW and BPC. But in SAC, do we have complex requirement and do we need to have coding? The answer is absolutely yes. If you have a simple reporting functionality, you might not need a heavy coding. But if you have a planning requirement, if your company is implementing planning, then definitely you will have to write some or more code. And where are those paradigms for coding in SAC? What are those avenues you can use for coding? There are two different places or paradigms you can use where you will put your code. The first place where you have to write your code is called Data Actions Advanced Formula. Data Actions Advanced Formula, we will go in great detail in our training. So don't worry if you don't understand anything right now. It's absolutely fine not to understand anything. Data action is basically a button on your story. If you click on that button, behind the scenes, all this coding will come into picture, will kick in, will execute, and your data will be transformed and stored in your model. That is what is called a data action advanced formula. And in the advanced formula, you will have to write these code. So as an example, I have given this is calculate allocation drivers, name of this step. There are 3 steps in this data action. Step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. And this icon means this is advanced formula. This icon, this is the same icon as this. These are all the types of step you can do in your data action. You can do a simple copy, you can do an allocation, you can have currency conversion, and then you can also have advanced formula. And this advanced formula is where you will have to write your coding. There is also an option of visually doing the advanced formula. That means if the requirement is very simple, then you can also go for visual. That means drag and drop or just no coding basically. Visually means from your mouse and your clicks and drag and drop you can achieve. But if the requirement is complex, then you'll have to click on this script, and this is advanced formula language. And this language is not ABAP. This language is not SQL. This language is SAC specific data action language, and it has certain format you have to adhere to. It has certain syntax you have to adhere to. So we will discuss all that. Like for example, for each is a loop. Okay, so this is a loop where it is happening. And then on the top, you will have something called member sets, which will filter the data. You will have your actual statements with the data statement. And then we have result lookup statements, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of things in data action. Again, don't worry if you don't understand anything right now. It's absolutely fine. I'm going to teach you step by step how to write a data action, advanced formula, how to write these steps, and also use the trace point for debugging. If you have issues, how you can use debugging. So that is the first place where you will do your advanced formulas, which is your coding. The second place where you have to do your coding is scripting. Scripting is basically JavaScript. You have to know JavaScript for that. So 99% of the requirements usually are satisfied with advanced formula. And I would highly recommend you to stick with advanced formula and not get tempted or allured to the world of scripting. I'm not saying it's bad. It's absolutely a great feature. But if you use more and more of scripting, your stories, from my experience, your stories will become very heavy and very complex. And when the user will execute the story, they will take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes to load the story. So I have my first project in SAC planning was actually migrating the stories from script based to data action based. They completely sunset the stories which were script based. The previous company who did that implementation, they did everything in scripting. Every widget, every chart, every table, every graph was heavily loaded with scripting, and the user was waiting for 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes before the story was loaded. So that is what came to us as a company, and then we changed everything into data action advanced formula. And I'll tell you like performance optimization, how you can do more steps we'll discuss during the performance optimization. But this is the second place where you can do your scripting also. So keep your scripting to as less as possible. More and more you should use the data action. Why? Because data action will store the data back into the model. So when you write data action, it takes the data from the model, it does the transformation, and it puts it back into the model. So next morning, when the reporting user will come and execute the report, the transformation has already happened and the transformed data is already ready and loaded and stored in the model. So there won't be any performance issues. But in scripting, the data transformations happens on the fly dynamically. Okay, so data will be transformed when the user will execute the report. It will go through all the coding which is written, and it has to execute, the SAC story has to execute the coding on the fly whenever the story is executed. That's why it is not recommended for a heavy coding. For a lighter coding, yes, absolutely, you can go for scripting, but don't go for heavy scripting in every widget of your SAC story. That will make it very, very slow. So you can imagine, you can compare it to live versus import data. Import data means it will store the data, right? Live means it is runtime. Same thing, same concept is between scripting and your data action. Data action is similar to import data. That means data action will trigger the code and store the transformed values in the model itself. This does not happen in real time when the story is executed. So you can do this. You can schedule the data action every night through a multi-action. And that multi-action is basically a sequence of data actions step by step, what data actions you want to run. If there are 10 data actions you want to run every night, then multi-action you can schedule in the calendar. And then the data is already ready next morning. Okay. But in scripting, the moment the user will execute the report, all that code will get executed on runtime. Okay. That's why it makes it very, very slow. But this is the second place where you can write your coding. You have to know TypeScript. TypeScript is a subset of JavaScript, which is used in your scripting. Examples. Why will you go for scripting? Then the question is, okay, is there any customer scenario which will force me to go for scripting? Yes, there are certain customer scenarios. Like for example, some of the customers, they want very, very highly customized stories. For example, a user drop down to display dynamic values. So if this drop down has to show you dynamic values based on certain criteria, right? Which is not like just pick the day, whatever is there in the data in my model. No, it's not like that. Look at the user ID, go to a particular table, and then get the specific values specific to that particular user. So all dynamic drop down values. If you want certain things like that, then you have to go for scripting. Another example can be top 3 results as an image. So for example, if the user wants to see its top 3 companies, top 3 countries where the sales was there. So top sales in which country, next sales in which country, next sales in which country. And it doesn't want a table format. It doesn't want a chart format. It wants a custom image format like this, right? So Germany was the highest, 136.09 million USD. Then it was USA, and then it was France. So if it wants something like this, like a medal in a competition or a tournament or Olympics, something like this it wants, then of course, simple SAC can't do that. Data action will not be able to do that. Then you have to do scripting, where you have to use that image, and in that image you have to put those values. So this is another example of highly customized requirement from customer, where you have to put scripting. Calculate values using R language. Say, for example, it has a button, show statistics button. So this is a simple table in the SAC, but the customer wants to see the average order quantity and the median order quantity, and it should happen when it clicks the button, show statistics. So that is based on R language. Then you have to go for scripting. You have to put a button here. Then you have to write some coding behind the button, which should take the average order value and the median order values. The moment the button is clicked, these values will be displayed. That kind of requirement, where the language is, R language based, statistics language. So all those examples is telling us that this is not achievable by data actions. You have to go for scripting. But again, if the requirement is for planning, I have seen from my experience, 99% of the time, the planning requirements are satisfied by data actions, not scripting. But these are the two places where you can do it. All right. So with that, I just wanted to quickly give you the assignment for today, and then we will open the forum for Q&A. So please bear with me for just 10 more minutes, and then we will have the Q&A. Now I'm going to show you how to create a simple model and a simple story based on a CSV file. So if you go to the batch one OneDrive folder, okay, we have a new folder here now, which I have created, which is called exercise files. In this exercise files, you will have session 2 sample model and story folder. In that particular folder, we have a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated values. So it's not an Excel, but it is an Excel type format, but it is more for faster data loading in SAC. You can of course load Excel also, but CSVs are faster. That's why I have created a comma separated value file. If you open this file, you will be able to see that what kind of data is there in this file. It's a simple data. We have 2 tabs in it. Oh, I had 2 tabs in this. Oh, I think the first tab got deleted somehow. Okay, never mind. So it has a very simple data. We only have 4 records. In my original file, I had around 1900 records, but it's okay. I will put those records back. I think I was doing some testing, so that's why I have only 1 tab here with only this data. But my original file had 1930 records. But that's okay. That's not a big deal. I will populate this Excel again, the CSV again with 1930 records. But this is a simple CSV file. It has sales order ID, sales order item number, product ID, note ID, which is blank, currency, gross amount, net amount, and tax amount. Okay. So this is a simple, very simple data. And we have 3 different measures. Measures means transaction data. These are called measures or key figures or KPIs, whatever you want to call. These are something which can be summed up, right? And then this is called master data or dimensions, sales order ID, your sales order item number, your product ID, and your note ID, which is blank, but you can populate this with values if you want. Then our currency. So all this part is your dimension, master data, and this part is your transaction data or measures. Okay. This is an exercise file. Again, this has very limited data. So don't worry, after the class, I will populate it with more data so that you will have more data to play around with. So this is my file, which is there on my OneDrive on this particular folder. So now what I will do is I will load the data and create a model So it will be basically an import data. So I'll create the model and then I will create a simple story on top of that. And you have to do this assignment after this class, which will just give you a quick idea of how a model and story looks like. So now if I log into my SAC trial, okay, let's log on to the SAC trial. Okay. So in my SAC trial, I have on the left-hand side, we have all the applications and all the icons here. So what we will do is we'll expand this and we will go to files. So files is basically a folder where you will have 3 subfolders: input forms. Input forms, as we know, used for planning to enter the data. We have the public folder and we have sample from SAP. SAP has given some samples for you to play around and look into it. So you can go into samples for that. And then any work you do should be done in the public folder. You can also have files directly stored under My Files. So you are in Files and My Files. So this is the My Files area. You can store anything here as well. But I am going to use public and I would recommend you to use public folder. Why? Because public folder is easily transportable. Anything which is public can be easily transported from one system to another system. That's why we should always use the public folder. And SAP samples are in the sample. So if you go here, you will see that these are certain samples which are given by SAP. This icon means it's a model. And this is a boardroom, this is a dashboard. So these are all different type of your stories. And then this is your model again. As you can see, this is an analytic model and this is your planning model. As I told you, there are 2 types of model as we saw in the architecture: planning model and analytic model. So this is just an icon of the model. This is just an icon of the story, and this is just an icon of your template for your different types of presentation, yeah, like your boardroom, your dashboard, etc. But this is an example of a simple story. So these are different files. Okay, these are called different files. So a model is a file, a story is a file, an input form is a file. So all these are called files. Why they are files? Because they can be easily transported from one system to another system. So that's why it is all under files. So in the files, I'll go back. We have 3 subfolders under My Files. I'm going into public, and in the public, I am going into creation of a new folder. So in public, I don't see a folder which I can reuse. So I'm going to create a new folder because I'm starting afresh. So I will just say SAC planning training. And then description is optional. You don't need to give description. It is blank here. If you give description there, then this description will come here as well. I'm going to add this. When you hover over it, this star will come. I'm going to add it to my favorites because I'm going to reuse this multiple times. Now, if you click on the favorites, you should see that this particular folder is showing in my favorites. So if I go inside this, it is blank right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a model. Okay. When I create a model, as you know, before a model, what we should create? If you go back to architecture, what is the
Connection.
exactly connection? So connection is mandatory because I have not created the connection. There you go. So connection is not created. So what I will do is if I go directly to model, there are 2 types of model: live data and import data. Okay. So I'm going to use the import data. So here I'll say create new model. And then it will say start with data or start with an empty model. So if I say start with data, it will give me this option. So you see the connection is still not created. I'm still going into the model and I'm directly creating a model. Where is my file? My local file? It is on my file server, which is my OneDrive. So you will choose this first one. Then it will say select source file. And here you will go to that particular OneDrive and you will select sales order items. Create model from file. It has already, okay. So the file I uploaded was a CSV, but the file which I have used is XLSX. So let me go back and update that CSV. Instead of CSV, I'll upload the, yeah, no, in the CSV itself, I should have it. Just 1 second. Okay. I see what's going on. Hold on. So I have it downloaded. Yesterday I downloaded. So give me 1 second. I will upload that one. Okay. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to sort this file. Yes. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to first download the file. So make sure from the OneDrive, you download the file on your desktop. That's the first step you will do. Once you download the file on your desktop, then you can start with this particular model creation, which I'm currently doing. So let me go back again to model, start with data. You can also start with an empty model, but I'm starting with the data. So click on next, local file, select the source file. So assuming that you have already downloaded the file from OneDrive into your local machine, which will be on your desktop or in your downloads or wherever you want to choose, you can choose that. And then we will choose that file and then click on import. And this will automatically create the connection for you. So when you do a flat file, usually it is loading from your local file. So it will automatically do that connectivity behind the scenes. So you don't have to worry about that. Only when you will connect to BW or you will connect to S4HANA, you will have to first create the connection and then you will have to load the data. But since it's a flat file, it's a local file, the connection is by default, it is created for you. As you can see, we have 4 measures: net amount, tax amount, sales order, item, and gross amount. Do you see any discrepancies here? Yes, sales order item is not a measure. We only had 3 measures: net amount, tax amount, and gross amount. So what I'm going to do is I am going to convert it to dimension. This is not a measure. Why took it this as a measure? Because if you see the file, the value is 1020. It looked at the value and it thought that this is a transaction data. That's why it categorized it as a measure, not your dimension. So if that happens, then all you need to do is just convert it to a dimension, and now we have sales order item as a dimension. If you want to check the details of the properties, so you can click on it. You can see that this is a generic type of dimension. We have account type, we have generic type, we have date type, we have version, we have organization, and we have timestamp. These are the types of dimensions you can have in a analytic model. Okay, and this is a analytic model. This is not a planning model. Where can you see that? So if you unselect this, then it will give you the model related properties at a model level. If you click on a dimension, it will give you dimension related properties. But if you unselect this, it will give you the overall model level properties. And you can see planning is disabled because we are loading it from a flat file, CSV. So by default, when you connect to a flat file, which is Excel or CSV, the planning capability is disabled. For planning enablement, if you want to enable that, then you should start with a empty model. When you start with an empty model, then planning capabilities you can enable, and then you can choose your dimensions and measures and then load the data. So for a planning, always start with an empty model. That's the recommended approach. But here we are not starting with an empty model. We are starting with directly loading the data from the flat file or CSV. So that's why planning is disabled here. And then we have made sure that measures are also fine. Data type is decimal 7. That's the default. Decimal 7 is the default of the data type for the measure. Aggregation type and all those things we will discuss later on. I don't want to go into too much detail. Just understand that these are the three measures it automatically identified. How? By the values. And then these were the dimensions, which is nothing but master data. It identified from the file. So once you are satisfied with it, you can also go to the preferences, which is your properties of the model. And here you can see it is analytic type. The model type is analytic. Okay. If you click on this gear icon, then it will say planning is off. If you want to enable planning, I cannot, because this is a simple flat file where planning will not be enabled. For planning, I have to start with a blank model and then go from there. And then there are some other settings like general settings. Name is sales order item. You can give any description if you want. Model layout is measure. So model layout measure means it will have different measures for the different KPIs or transaction data columns you have. If the model layout is account based, like I will show you that in the next system. I don't want to confuse people here who are new to SAC, but just understand that there are two types of layout: measure based and account based. New model type allows for both multiple measures and account members, both. But here we don't have an account dimension. We only have simple measures and simple dimensions, which are corresponding to my CSV file, whatever I have. We have also something called account, which we will discuss later on. So don't worry about it. And then we have some access and privacy. Again, we will discuss this later on. Date setting is there, where you can define the granularity of your date if you have date dimension. Planning capabilities, if you want to enable planning capabilities. Conversions, if you want to enable currency conversion and unit conversion, then you have these options here. Structure priority, again, we'll discuss later, don't worry. Date and performance, some performance optimization related features are also here, which you can enable. Again, we will go into the detail of these, each one of these. Today, I am just showing you a very, very simple model and very, very simple story. I'm not going to discuss each of these options, but I'm just showing you that these are the general properties which you can change from this wrench icon. So if you click on this wrench icon, then the model preferences are there. So once we are satisfied with this, we have made sure that the correct fields are identified as measures and correct fields are identified as dimensions. Then click on save. And then it will ask you, where do you want to save your model? I want to go into public. I want to go into the new folder which I created, SAC planning training, and I want to save it here. Description again is optional. You can give a description, or you don't want to, then you don't have to. The star marked are mandatory and you have to provide a value. So I've given same thing for name and description, and I'll just click on save. This is a new model type. Okay, new means there was an old model type also. Again, we will discuss in the next classes the differences between old model and new model. But this is by default a new model type. Okay, and what it says, the model is saved successfully. A version dimension was added automatically. So version dimension, as you can see, I didn't have it in my Excel or didn't have it in my CSV. but it automatically added, and it also added one value to it. What is the value? If you want to see, just click on it. Sorry, click here and go to my data foundation view. I will click on the version now. And here you will see that it is showing you there is only one version, which is public.actual. So by default, the value of this dimension will be populated with public.actual. And values of a dimension are called members. That is the technical name used in SAC. So net amount has these many members, 4 members in net amount. Tax amount also has 4 members. Similarly, version only has 1 member. Sales order ID has 4 members. So these values of the actual column are called members in SAC. So that's what member means. So this is a very simple one. Just 4 records got loaded. Results on the bottom, you can see, if you want to just minimize the left-hand side panel, you can do that for more space. So as you can see on the bottom, you will see how many records are there, and you can toggle this data foundation view. If you don't want to see the data, you can toggle this. If you want to check the data, then you can also see the data. Right now, just 4, but I will populate it with more data in the exercise files. So this is the first step. We created the model. It did not ask for the connection because it's a simple flat file upload. The flat file upload is a local server. That means it took from your laptop or desktop, and it did not ask for connection. It creates the connection behind the scenes for you. Only when you are actually loading from BW or S4 or any other sources, then you have to go for connectivity, and you have to make sure that the connections is properly working. Now, can I see this model in my folder? Let me go to my favorites. This planning folder I created for training. It is there in my favorites. I will click on it. Yes, this is the model which you can see now. This is what type. This is the type analytic model. When was it created? When was it changed? Changed by whom? All those properties you can see here. And then if you want to delete, you can select, and you can also delete the model if you want. If you want to share the model with someone else, then you can share it with other users also. So on and so forth. Now I will create a story. So you click on the plus sign. As you can see, I can create a lot of things, but currently I'm only interested in my story. So I'm going to create a story. And in the story, I will just choose responsive. There are different types of stories. You can have canvas story. You can have grid-based story. That means just a fixed Excel sheet kind of format. You can have canvas, and you can have responsive. Responsive means it will respond dynamically to every device. On the mobile, it will auto adjust the size, and on the iPad versus the desktop, it will automatically adjust, which will not happen in the canvas. So I will choose I'll choose a responsive. And in the responsive, I will have 2 options. ODE, optimized design experience. In short, we call it ODE, or classic, the previous one. So SAP has made a lot of change, and it has revamped the story design interface. That's why it is categorizing all those new features and functionalities and look and feel of the new story under optimized design experience. That means a new design experience. There is a classic design experience also, and those classic stories are gradually being deprecated, phased out. So recommendation is, when you're creating a new story, always go for optimized design experience. So create that. And then it will show you that we have a new present mode here. So all those new functionalities and features, this is a default functionality that if they are introducing any new feature, they will highlight this when you are creating a story. But we don't need to know that right now. So it's a simple story. This is the interface. It is blank right now. And here, this is advanced mode. I'm not interested in advanced mode, so I will go to simple mode. So if you want to add your scripting, for example, then you have to go for advanced mode. But we are not dealing with scripting or any coding. So you can disable the advanced mode, or if you want to enable it, you can enable it. As you can see, the moment I clicked on the advanced mode, certain additional functionalities and options came in. If I just click on it, they will go away. So those advanced mode is required for scripting. Okay. On the left-hand side, there is something called widgets. What is a widget? Any object you put in your story, whether it's a table, whether it's a chart, whether it's a filter. Input control means filters. You can put filters also. And then is it just a simple text? It's just a header. All those are called widgets. So anything you put, any object you put on a story is called a widget. So for now, I will start with a table. I'll just drag it on my editor and it will say, do you want to use existing model or no model? So I have an existing model. So I will use an existing model and I will select the folder. It is under public, under the SAC planning training, and this is my model. So it is trying to fetch the data from the model. As we know, we only have 4 records, so the data is very, very less. And as you can see, only one measure came in, gross amount, no dimensions. So I have to add the dimension on the right-hand side. You will see this builder panel and you will have a styling panel. So there are 2 panels to let you add more and more dimensions and measures to your story. One is called builder panel and one is called styling panel. Styling panel means the look and feel. You want to make something bold. You want to change the color of your table, your background colors, your header colors. So all those beautification, cosmetic changes are styling, but your actual configuration of your columns, rows, etc., any filters you want to put is under the builder panel. So these are the 2 panels we will use. So in the builder panel, you see there are no rows, and in the columns, we have only one measure, which is my gross amount. That's why it's showing as gross amount. So I'll just go on add dimension and I will say, show me product ID wise my gross amount. So this is my product ID wise gross amount. And if you want to see the version also is there, only actual version is there. We don't have any plan version. Why? Because this is not a planning model. This is just an analytic model. So we will only have one value. So it's not really useful. So I'm not going to select that. You can also add your dimension in the columns also. So you can add version dimension, for example, on the top. So you see version is shown instead of rows, it is shown in the columns and version is shown as actual only. And then you can select more measures by selecting on this filter in the columns. As you can see, we have only one gross amount, but if you want everything, just select everything and all members, or I can select individually also and then select OK. And now you will see we have version actual. You can put version on the top of the measure just by dragging and dropping so that it is not repeating multiple times. So you will have version actual and then you will have gross amount, net amount, tax amount. So this is just a very simple story and you can adjust the size of it. You can move the story and adjust the size and formatting of it if you want. So this is my simple story. And then I'm also going to introduce a chart. And in this chart, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the type as maybe pie chart. So it needs one measure and it needs one dimension. Okay. So we will use the measure. We will use maybe net amount as my measure. And for dimension, which will be defined for the color, I will use product ID. And then you can see if you want to hide this panel, builder and styling panel, then click on this right side panel, hide. So it will go away. If you want to bring it back, right side panel comes back. Similarly, on the left-hand side, if you are done with your widgets, you have added all the widgets, you don't need to see them, then hide that with the left-hand side panel, or you can make it visible by clicking on these. So I'm done. I don't need any other widget. So I will just put a chart here, and then I will make it bigger so that the chart is more visible. And you can see we have only 4 product IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the most of the product, the almost 40% of my sales is coming from RC1056 product. And then we have next one, again, almost 40% coming from MB1034, and so on and so forth. So these, the slice or the size of this pie is based on what is the volume compared to others. Which one is the highest, then which one is the lowest, then which one is the lowest, so on and so forth. So you can have different chart types, and you can have play around with this. I'm just going to save the story now. All I needed was the table, and I'm going to minimize this so that it doesn't overlap with my chart. And then I have a chart as well. And then I can make it also bigger to make it align with the size of my table. And then I can click on this save to save my story again in the same folder. So you have this SAC planning training, and then there is no story. That's why it's not showing you anything, but there is a model there. Don't think that is an empty. It is not showing because we are dealing with story, and it tried to find story and it doesn't have any story. This is the first story. So I'm just going to say sales overview. Same thing you can put in the description as well. Okay. And then if you click on a particular widget, for example, chart, the properties of chart will come in the builder panel. And then if you click on the table, the property of the table will come in the builder panel. So whatever you click here, the respective properties are visible here. Okay. And then if you want to put any additional filters, you can put the filter, like for example, you want to only check for one particular product, you can only select one particular product and say okay. So this will be filtered for only one particular product. So play around with this. Again, this is for absolute freshers. If you're already experienced, then this is a very, very trivial and very rudimentary thing which I'm showing. But for absolute beginners, I just wanted to show them the look and feel, how you can create a simple model based on a local flat file, which is your CSV file or XLS file, and you can create a simple chart. Again, I will populate that with more data so that you don't have just 4 records, but you have at least few hundreds of records. Around 2000 records, I'll put in 1960 or 1970 to be precise. And then you can play around with that more and more. So this is just a very, very basic overview of how you can create a model. The connections we did not create for this because it was a simple flat file. Connections we will have to create when it will come to S4HANA or BW for HANA. Here, the connection is automatically done for you behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about that. But if you are creating a model from scratch, then loading to the, connecting to the source systems, the actual source systems, then you have to do the connections. And where can you see the connections? If you click on the hamburger icon, there is something called connections here. So you can click on the connections and you will be able to see that these are the default connections provided by the trial server by SAP. I did not create this. Okay. It is showing created by my name, but this was already there. When you will get a trial server, the advanced trial server, you will see that these 4 will automatically come, but all of them will have this exclamation mark because these are not working. These are just by default given to you by SAP, which shows you that if you can have S4HANA, you can have the success factors, which is cloud. You can have, again, the Google export, which is your Google Drive, right? So all these type of connections there. But once you are ready to create the connectivity to BW or your S4HANA, then you have to click on this plus sign to add a connection. And then you will choose that I have an on-premise system, which is my BW, and then I will connect to my BW. And here you will give the actual details of the connection. We'll have to give name, description, host name, the port number, the client which you are connected to, then your authentication method, whether it's a SAML, which is a single sign-on, or whether you're using a user ID password. So all that connectivity you will have to do either yourself or in your company administrators are there. They will create the connection for you and they will ask you that, okay, use this connection. So it depends. If you have an admin team, then they will do it for you. If not, if you have the access to do that and you have been asked to do that, you can do it yourself as well here, coming to the connectivity. Okay. All right. So with that, I will stop here the main class session for today. I will stop. So the session content is now complete. The session is now complete. So thank you for your patience. I know we again went over, but this was very important to show the basic look and feel, and the exercise file is already there on the Google Drive. I will make sure I update more data into it. So with that, I will stop the recording for the main session. Thank you very much for attending the second session. Please stay here. We are going to start another recording, which will be only for Q&A. People for whom it's very late, they might be in India or they might be in Australia and it is very, very late for them. Feel free to drop off. Don't worry about it. Everything is recorded. Even the Q&A session after this will be recorded, so you will not miss anything. Thank you for attending the second session. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm just going to restart the recording for the Q&A. So just give me a second.